Okay, so this is the second video in the series, and I'm kind of breaking down my own discoveries. And so we just in the last video we looked at finding the Lord of the Year and finding the significator for the king. And it looked like in our particular case, and we're going to go back to the chart, of course, that the Lord of the Year and the ruler of the king were the same planet, which was the sun. So, in this particular part of the or section for the mundane talks about the other cast of characters. And as you can see, when the Lord of the Ascendant is the Lord of the Year, whence is known the condition of the king and of his allies and the common people and certain men, both religious and secular. And the first thing that he does is he gives us a little bit more to go for, right? So the whole other chart or whole other video was about finding the Lord of the Year and finding the king based on, whatever the criteria was in that particular video, right? But now he says, Abu Mashar says that you can look from Saturn, from the sun, and from the 10th and from the king significator if it's different from those three, obviously. And so if you were to see those four well disposed, announce the good condition of the king. So let's look at those. They are Saturn, the sun, the 10th, and the significator for the king. We already know that the significator for the king is the sun. So we're only looking at three of them. We're looking at Saturn, we're looking at the sun, we're looking at the cusp of the 10th, and then, as he said, um, the ruler of the significator for the king. So that gives us more information. And as you understand, as you remember, those of you who were watching the last one, as you may remember, we were looking at this sun applying to Saturn conjunction. We were looking at this and how but now it gives us another idea, right? We were looking at how, okay, if the sun represents both the common man, the Lord of the Year, and the king, how does it, whatever's going on with it, its local determination, so to speak, how does that affect it? But now we see how this Sun Saturn conjunction with Saturn in fall, but the sun exalted. So understand that the sun is excessively hot and dry, and the Saturn is excessively cold and dry. And so there's going to be kind of a hot and cold kind of thing going on. We should see it with our Mad King, and they should experience it. So they should experience kind of this hot and cold thing. Also, restriction and limitation, right? Because if we're using it primarily as the sun, then Saturn is going to restrict the sun. Of course, the sun is combusting Saturn, so it's weakening Saturn very much, but still the influence of Saturn is going to have a restrictive, is going to be, Saturn obviously in Aries is the opposite of what we would want Saturn to act like. So there's going to be issues around seriousness, around responsibility, around labor, work and labor. So there's going to be issues around that, right? Because if we're talking about a fallen Saturn, then that's not a Saturn that behaves well with its significations like seriousness, labor, responsibility. You see where I'm going? So that becomes a problem. On top of that, whatever Saturnian impulse would be there, which is already weakened, Saturn is also combusted by the sun, and so that's not really a good sign either, because we know that the sun represents arrogance, right? So the sun represents arrogance and hubris and kind of confidence and sometimes overconfidence, right? And messianism. It can even be messianism. Note that he's been going to, I was just going to say, note that he's been moving towards the rhetoric, a lot of his rhetoric, especially since the beginning of the war. And note that both of these planets are in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, the god of war. So note that he's been really leaning into a lot more religious rhetoric, and note that they were just saying things about Pete Hegseth turning this into a religious war, using a lot of that kind of language, and that it's alarming people inside the Pentagon. And so note that the ninth house is the Saturn is the ruler also of the ninth at the same time. And so, of course, if the ruler of the ninth is fallen, that would say to me that the religion, right? The ninth house is the house of religion. The ninth house that would not necessarily be a good thing for religion. But I haven't actually found the information specific to what the houses exactly represent. And we'll, of course, get to that and we'll come back to this chart with it. But what I thought I would do next is I would go to the cast of characters. Maybe we can find Pete Hegseth in this because his ministers, we found the king, but his ministers, and especially his minister of war, or his, head general. Well, of course, he's not a general at all, right? So we'll see here. So we just found. Oh, and we had seen that. Oh, well, let me just go back. Well, we'll come back to the 10th house when we come back to the chart. Okay, so how it is looked at for the soldiers of the king. So that's the first thing, and that he said that you ought to look to the soldiers of the king from the 11th and its lord. Whence, if you were to see the 11th fit and its lord well disposed, and Mars well disposed, of course, represents war, announce even the conditions of the king's soldiers to be good. Okay, shall we? Let's do two of them and then come back. How is it looking for the wealthy and great men who are below the king? Note all of the people in the Epstein files who they're protecting. However, you would take the condition of wealthy and great men who are below the king from Jupiter and make him a participator with the Lord in whose domicile he was. Okay, so let's just do that, etc., if you were to find him. So, what did he say? If we were to be looking for the soldiers, we would be looking for the 11th house, the ruler of which, and then Mars, right? Note also that Mars is we're in the 30th, first of all, we're in the 29th degree. We're not, I can't say we're in the 30th degree. We're in the 29th degree of Pisces, right? So we're almost at the very end, meaning that Aries is intercepted in the 11th house here, right? So because of the interception, then Mars is part ruler of the 11th. So we have two rulers. We have Mars and we have Jupiter. So I'm going to go with those two. And if I'm not, yeah, Mars here is at 1411 and Jupiter is at 15. So that also then means that Mars is trining the Jupiter. Okay, so what did he say? We would be looking to see what is the condition of the ruler. So the ruler of the cusp is Jupiter. So he's exalted, obviously. He's relatively close to Sirius. Now, but remember what one of the things that they say about exaltation, or that I remember having read about exaltation, is that there is a sense of non-reality, or there can be a sense of inflation, or not. There can. What am I looking for? Kind of a lack of awareness, kind of an unconsciousness because of maybe an overconfidence, or a seeing things too well. Oftentimes when I see in horary, one of the significators is exalted, especially if it's in the exaltation of the other, then there's a fantasy element sometimes to it. So just keep that in mind. Just kind of keep, but my issue is the hubris, and also Jupiter already is inflation, right? So it's to be inflated. So there might be an inflation, a sense, but Jupiter in Cancer is a very, very strong significator. But note that Cancer, remember who's the other significator? Mars. So note that Cancer is the ruler, is the fall of Mars. So that's actually not so great. Note also that Jupiter is in Cancer, and Mars is in Pisces. So Mars is applying to Pisces, so he's pushing nature onto Jupiter. So there's a reception. Jupiter is receiving Mars, but Mars will not receive Jupiter because Jupiter is in his fall. So even though there's this trine, and it's a good strong trine for one of them, for Jupiter, but it's not such a good strong trine for Mars, who's the natural significator. And remember, they are both significators of the 11th, meaning that then this trine is what's going to rule the military during this time period. So I think that's kind of interesting. So that this trine, this Mars, Jupiter. Also remember, Mars and Jupiter are enemies. And so now so Mars and Jupiter are enemies. They're working together. They're working in this harmonious way together, but Jupiter isn't helping Mars. Right? Mars is assisting Jupiter necessarily, is, what do they always say? Conferring his nature and conferring his testimony, or what's the term that he uses? I forget. It'll come back to me. But it basically, virtue. That's right. He's donating his virtue. He's giving his virtue to Jupiter, but Jupiter can't give his back, right? Mars is not going to accept it back from him. So that already, this trine, and maybe that's the gung ho nature of going to war right now, right? And so there's that gung ho trine aspect of Mars and Jupiter, the two rulers of the 11th. But on some level, the true significator of war is Mars, and Jupiter is not helping him. And also, as I said, or I don't know if I already said, but Mars in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer, to me, look like we're dealing with water related, mostly water, and like he's sent in the Marines there. They've closed the Strait of Hormuz, a body of water. It's all about this body of water right now, and opening up this body of water, expanding, expanding this body of water. So that's an interesting thing. Now, I might be going off on my own little tangent, you know what I'm saying? But oh, we didn't look at the bigwigs, but we'll look at bigwigs and bishops. So how it is looked at for bishops and other secular clerics, and it's from Jupiter and the Lord of his domicile, and from the ninth and its Lord. Okay, so Jupiter and the Lord in whose domicile he is in for the guys that are below the king, and then Jupiter and the Lord of his domicile, which in the case of our chart is the moon, and from the ninth and its Lord. Let's look at those two things. Okay, so a lot of things are kind of focusing around Jupiter, and of course it makes sense. Of course, once again, I'm kind of working piece by piecemeal, so piece by piece. So I don't have all of the information, so I'm kind of just winging it my usual way, right? But we can kind of see it because obviously the second house might be certainly would be usually our money, but this might be finances during the year. So I don't know yet, but note that the part of fortune is there and that the big wigs are there on it, right? And so also it's said to look at the ruler of the ninth, right? Jupiter and the ruler of the ninth. And so it doesn't look so great for, as far as ruler of the ninth is concerned, it doesn't look so great for bishops in this particular time period. So I assume that, of course, we're talking about the United States. This is for Washington, D.C. So the Pope wouldn't uh, necessarily be involved. It would be interesting to use Rome, to do this for Rome, and to see that very significator, because that would obviously involve the Pope. But in the United States, it's not looking great for the religious, and maybe more controlled, because here we've got the sun. Sun is religion already. Sun is God, right? Ninth house is God. Sun is God, and so Sun and Mars together, Sun and Saturn together. Oh, it could also maybe represent kind of this need to note that the Sun is also the people and it's the people and it's also the king. So once again, we've been seeing him trying to leverage religion, to give him more clout, to give him more stature. But also notice that religion isn't very strong right now. Religion isn't strong. The people are stronger than the religion, right? The people are stronger than the religion. This is also the king, but the people and the king are both stronger than the religion, and they're both burning it out. They're both, it's already weak. So I would say that, and think of something like TPUSA, which is essentially an organization that's trying to kind of establish Christian nationalism as a format, especially as an educational format, right? They're trying to put it into all of the high schools, etc. And so, and this whole thing with Erica Kirk. So, but that's not really working, is it? It's not really. Things are less religious than they have been. So it doesn't look like it's a good thing for the religious if we look at it from the ninth house. If we look at it from Jupiter, it doesn't look bad at all. And once again, it's on the part of fortune. But this Mars coming from it, so from the second. Oh, what was it? It was looking at the ruler. So once again, bishops. It was Jupiter, its ruler, and then the ruler of the ninth. So its ruler is this. Oh, with Venus, Moon. Those are both planets of appetite. Um, so we could see more scandals. We could see more scandals, and note also that. Oh no, 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 that's wrong. Never mind. Okay, so going back to the book, let's find a few other characters, and maybe we'll wrap it up. Okay, how it is looked at for soldiers of the king and his allies and bearers of arms. Okay, for soldiers and allies of the king and bearers of arms, you will take it from Mars, okay, which we'll go back and do that again, look at that again. How it is looked at for the religious who live under a rule. Indeed, for the regular religious serving God who have been placed for this purpose that they may serve God, blah, 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 especially monks. They're using Saturn. Let's see. Black vestments, yes. So you will look from Saturn. Okay. Oh, well, see, there we go again. Using for looking at the religious, use Saturn. He's talking about kind of like monks and people like that, not the bishops, but regular priests and monks. Count monks, yes, you should count monks, and especially those wearing black vestments, and for old men and decrepit and low class people doing heavy works like ditch diggers and the like. Okay, so that's another thing, right? Okay. How it is looked at for women, that's going to be Venus in her place. And then merchant and tradesman, that's important. So let's look at that. Of course, that's going to be for Mercury, right? Yep, Mercury, which you would find him free and well disposed. So let's do a few of these. Oh, wait, low class and common people from the moon. Okay, so low class and common people from the moon, women from Venus, merchants from Mercury, and kind of low class religious, like low level religious from Saturn. We already looked at Saturn, right? We were already talking about Saturn and religion. Saturn is the ruler of the ninth house in this chart, so that's already a thing. Yeah. So that showed up. But remember how they specified those bearing arms was Mars, and once again, this water signs and Mars, Mercury. Now, here's the other thing: Mars, Mercury is a lie. Mars, Mercury is chicanery. Mars, Mercury is rogue actions. Mars, Mercury is crime. Mars, Mercury is, yeah, Mars, Mercury is coloring outside the lines and um, uh, sharp speech and things of that. Also, though, note here that note here that Mars Mercury is in Pisces. It's mute. Right, so that's interesting too. So there might be, I don't know, that's interesting. But so this is what's going on with Mars. Mercury is the ruler of the ascendant, right, which would generally be thought of to be the ruler of the year, and the ruler of the fourth, which is the country itself, right? Which I mean, that's how I would look at it. But of course, once again, I haven't done that yet. But of course, fourth house is the ground. It's called the what subterranean. So it's anything above and under the ground. So I'm going to look at that in that particular way in this particular case. So until I get, and like I said, I'll revisit once I get the real idea of what the houses actually mean. So anyway, so there's the Mars, there's the Mercury. So okay, remember what was it about merchants in this time period? The Mercury is fallen, and it's applying to the conjunction of a malefic. Now, there is a whole sign kind of trine going on. There's from Jupiter, so there's reception from Jupiter that's kind of helpful. It's not a full an actual reception where it's an applying an applying aspect, but Mars has the applying aspect, but Mercury is applying to Mars, and it's nighttime, so Mars doesn't have the duplicity, or the main isn't the main person for the duplicity, so that's not that super helpful. So this Mars is quite malefic, is rather malefic, and of course, once again, Mars rules the 11th, which was another representation of military people, right? The military. So we've got, it looks like here we've got Mercury and Mars and the military. It's kind of like the year of, even if we're not using Mercury as specifically as the year based on our what we just learned, we can use it as the Lord of the Ascendant is the first thing we would look at generally, and so we can already kind of see that. So for merchants, Mercury is fallen. Mars is war. So war is affecting merchants this year, and it's affecting them badly. Now, this Mercury is stationary going direct. So that's one thing, but it's still deep in it's deep in its sign of its fall. So we can see already so that merchants are not in good condition at all. So people who are opening businesses, remember that Mercury represents business, and mercantile, mercado, right? All of those are Mercury words. So it should not be a good year for markets. It should not be a good year for merchants, right? So definitely very interesting. I'm also thinking maybe Mercury rules lawyers, although judges in the judicial system is really Jupiter. But it's interesting. That's where it seems like the money is with the Jupiter. Then what was it? Venus for the women. Note that she's in the sign of her detriment. She's sharing this. She is just coming out from underneath the rays, right? So she's just leaving. She's coming up from under. Both the moon and Venus are coming out from underneath the rays of the sun, right? So they're coming back into what's written for. They're coming back into visibility. Venus is in her fall. She's void, of course. So is the moon. She's just left the square of Jupiter, and which is kind of works more better for the moon than it does. Well, remember, the moon are the common people, right? So the moon is void, of course, here, but there's it's leaving a decent, actually, that's interesting that there's the Venus and the Jupiter. It looks like possibly it's maybe women and not maybe the rich so much, but maybe women and clergy will be trying to help the common people. Although it's really a square, so working for or working towards, but it looks like maybe women and the common people are kind of coming together, or that there's some kind of I don't know, yeah. Once again, ninth house is once again religion that they've talked about, but maybe that's also might be other cultures coming together. Who knows? But right, so that's kind of the way it looks like. That's kind of how I'm going about doing it. We'll see. I'll probably get more direction as we continue. But what did we find? We found more significators for the king. We found a significator for two different significators for the military, right? So one was the 11th house, for which we have two significators because there's an intercepted sign. And then the other was Mars himself, right? And which of course makes sense as he was another military. Then we had Mercury for businesses, and look also. So it looks like there will be, oh, and see, crime, crime. there might be more underground crime. There might be more rise of underground crime because Rahu is tends to be underground crime, and it's called the agent of ambition. But note it's in the sign of the fall of the planet that represents business. So there's some there looks like there might be unscrupulous methods by which people try to make money. You know, the more, and of course that's fully once again with Mars too, right? Because Mercury Mars usually represents, excuse me, breaking the law. So with Rahu too on top of it, I think we're going to have like maybe an epidemic of either, I don't want to say crime, but well, but of people cutting corners, breaking rules, doing different things in order to be able to make money. Because because this is affecting merchants, the Rahu and the Mars here, and and what was the last thing that we looked at? Oh, we looked at women, right? It was this Venus with the common man and Moon. We saw that the Venus women are not having the best of times, right? She's just come up from under the, she's been up under the heat, which at least that's useful. She's not really very close, thankfully. She's still within 15 degrees of the Saturn, so she's still in what we would call assembly with it, but she's very much done with any kind of real relationship. And then the moon just left her, and so that moon Venus thing is kind of helpful. I think that remember both of these planets represent appetite, and there might be a little star issue with star, right? Venus is in Aries, right? There might be issues with people starving themselves a little. I don't want to go that far, but also remember Saturn is lack, and the sun. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting confluences here. Anyway, okay, so that's how we would. It looks like that's how we would take care of the rest of these cast of characters.